This is Books for Breakfast, a podcast where we talk about books and writing. I'm Enda Wiley.
And I'm Peter Sirr.
And you're all very welcome to this morning's show. On this morning's show, we mark the passing of one great poet and the elevation to Nobel honours of another.
And our Toaster Challenge guest is non-fiction writer and novelist Neil Hegarty.
So the coffee's made,
The toast is on,
and the books are on the table.
We begin this week with Derek Mahon, one of our greatest poets who died earlier this month.
Yeah, it is. It's really sad to think that he's gone. I mean, Derek Mahon was one of Ireland's most accomplished and brilliant poets, I think. His poems were always lyrical, witty, ironic, cosmopolitan. I mean, there was a huge frame of reference in his poetry, I think, which meant that his poetry had a kind of impressive global perspective to it. I mean, what did you think of his work, Peter?
Well, first, I mean, just to say, because you can never really get used to poets dying. It's been a really bad year, really, because it always seems that they'll somehow prevail eternally, or that they'll be there accompanying you on your life's journey. But, you know, as I said, it's been a bad year. Kieran Carson, Van Boland, Derek Mahon, you know, and it's strange because he seemed to have become almost an accidental laureate of the hope at the end of the pandemic tunnel recently with the viral everything is going to be all right.
But it certainly seemed to give great hope to people during the pandemic. He was a rare kind of spirit, wasn't he, Peter?
Yeah, he was a rare kind of spirit. I mean, a kind of insider, outsider, supremely gifted, preferring to see the world, if you like, from the edge and to kind of align himself with people and objects on the margins, whether it's, you know, lost hubcaps or abandoned garages, disused sheds, or the apotheosis of Tins or Ovid, exiled in Thomas. But, you know, there was a great, I mean, in some ways he was kind of an old-fashioned poet. I mean, there was an old-fashioned sort of decorum nearly, or grace, but also a kind of ferocious, sly and mischievous wit, and a kind of sense of a kind of Beckettian melancholy, but also more than that, a need to break through that into something like celebration, like that poem about the life of a leaf that might come out right this winter.
Yeah, I love that line. And do you have a poem that you would like to read of his, Peter?
I thought I would just pick on this one that I've always liked greatly, and it's called Tractatus. It's dedicated to Aidan Higgins and Alana Hopkin. The world is everything that is the case, from the fly giving up in the coal shed to the winged victory of Samothrace. Give blame, praise to the fumbling God who hides shamefacedly his aged face, whose light retires behind its veil of cloud. The world, though, is also so much more. Everything that is the case imaginatively. Tacitus believed mariners could hear the sun sinking into the western sea, and who would question that titanic roar, the steam rising wherever the edge may be. But I just love that idea of the world being everything that is the case imaginatively.
A poem that I really loved by him is called Courtyards in Delft, which he wrote in 1981, and it richly recreates Pieter de Hoek's Dutch Golden Age painting. You know that painting, Peter, of a courtyard in Delft, which he'd painted in 1659. But I love the details of the painting.
Yeah.
But I love the way he captures the painting in the poem, the intricacy of the language, the trim composure of trees, the dirty dog, the fiery gin. I think it's one of his finest poems.
Just because I remember seeing it just before you read it. I mean, I remember seeing that years ago. Because I was working, I think, in Poetry Ireland years ago, and it won a prize before it was published. And so I actually saw the manuscript of the collection Courtyards in Delft. Before it was published by Gallery Press's Courtyards in Delft, before going on to be published in The Hunt by Night. So I remember just reading that poem for the first time and being totally blown away by it. I think it is one of the most extraordinary Mahon poems, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant poem to read because I love actually reading it out loud as well. There's a huge sonic power to it. It's commanding, it's memorable. As I said earlier, passionate intensity. And also, you know, the way he always had that kind of formal power to his work, its structure and its rhymes. But then there's the intelligence there, which is always apparent in his poems. And there's a startling shift in the poem where he remarks, "I lived there as a boy." Do you remember that line, Peter? And we kind of sense then the coming conflict in Ireland between the Williamite armies and the Catholics, which culminated in the Battle of the Boyne in 1690. So there's this amazing kind of historical reference at play in the poem as well. So he wrote this poem for Gordon Woods. And would you like me to read it, Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oblique light on the trite, on brick and tile, immaculate masonry, and everywhere that water tap, that broom and wooden pail to keep it so. House proud, the wives of artisans pursue their thrifty lives among scrubbed yards, modest but adequate. Foliage is sparse and clings, no breeze ruffles the trim composure of those trees. No spinet playing, emblematic of the harmonies and disharmonies of love. No lewd fish, no fruit, no wide-eyed bird about to fly its cage, while a virgin listens to her seducer, mars the chaste perfection of the thing and the thing made. Nothing is random, nothing goes to waste. We miss the dirty dog, the fiery gin, that girl with her back to us, who waits for her man to come home for his tea, will wait till the paint disintegrates and ruined dikes admit the esurient sea. Yet this is life too, and the cracked outhouse door of a verifiable fact as vividly mnemonic as the sunlit railings that front the houses opposite. I lived there as a boy, and know the coal glittering in its shed, late afternoon lambency informing the deal table, the ceiling cradled in a radiant spool. I must be lying low in a room there, a strange child with a taste for verse, while my hard-nosed companions dream of fire and sword upon parched veld and fields of rain-swept gorse.
And thanks to Gallery Press for allowing us to read these poems in tribute to Derek Mahon. And we should also say that there's actually a new collection of Derek Mahon poems out from Gallery Press as well, called Washing Up. And these are poems prompted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm sure they will be a great addition to his work, and we look forward to reading that as well.
Yeah, we definitely look forward to reading that. That's great. And yeah, you're right, Peter. Thanks to Gallery Press for giving us permission to read those two wonderful poems. So there was other news this week, wasn't there, Peter? There was better news because the Nobel Prize for Literature was awarded to the American poet Louise Glück. I'm just wondering, did you expect that, Peter? Was it a surprise to you?
Well, I don't ever expect anything from Nobel Prizes in that they're entirely unpredictable, I think. And I don't necessarily take them that seriously either, but I think that she is a very interesting poet. You know, Derek Mahon could have been a Nobel Prize winning poet as well, but I think, and plenty of sublime poets have gone without big rewards, and their work isn't any less valuable. But I think Glück is a very interesting poet, and like actually Mahon, she's a poet of great intelligence and subtlety, as well as she has a great gift for sort of plangent singing line. And I've actually been following her, I suppose, since I got my hands, I suppose, not her first book, but her second book, The House on Marshland. I came across that years ago, and I was just kind of hooked by it. There's some great poems in that. And, you know, like she published lots of books, actually. She was quite prolific. I mean, those books like Meadowlands, The Wild Iris, that she got the Pulitzer Prize for. Verna was a great book that I was reading recently, The Village, which I think you reviewed, didn't you, for the DORB?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I remember reviewing that for the Irish Times, actually. She was also an excellent essayist, wasn't she, Peter?
I really like the essays. And I think, you know, it's funny because I've been rereading Proofs and Theories, the essays on poetry, which the Echo Press published way back in 1994. And I think one of the most telling essays in that is Against Sincerity, which is, it's kind of a meditation on self in poetry. And she wants to break down the often automatic alignment that readers make between the, if you like, the living, experiencing, autobiographical I and the often very different identity of the speaker of a poem. And I think it very much applies to her own work. I mean, she says, we are unnerved, I suppose, by the thought that authenticity in the poem is not produced by sincerity. And she's an image of maybe people looking for kindliness in the face of a poet like Frost, and finding it maybe odd because he's different from the poems. And I think we're very literal minded. We want the speaker and the poet to be the same. We want poetry to be some sort of literal testimony coming out of people's lives, like we want, or people want, kind of pure, unmediated confessionalism. And so she's very much separating herself from that whole tradition, saying this is not what I do. I mean, you have your very strong, forceful kind of lyric eye there, but it's not necessarily or isn't just Louise Glück that's speaking. It's more kind of diverse and interesting than that.
I mean, it's interesting to see as well what the chair of the committee of the Nobel Prize said. He said Louise Glück's voice is unmistakable, it's candid and uncompromising, and it signals this poet wants to be understood. But he said also her voice is full of humour and biting wit. I feel there's also kind of an exposed hard-edgedness to her work as well. And I like that she doesn't want things to be too easy for the reader. She said, I just like poems that feel too complete, the seal too tight. I just like being herded into certainty, which I think is a very interesting comment.
It is. I mean, but it's like what Jonathan Galassi, who was her longtime friend and editor, he's the president of Farrar, Straus and Giron. This is quoted in the New York Times a couple of days ago, and he said her work is like an inner conversation. Maybe she's talking to herself, maybe she's talking to us. There's a kind of irony to it.
Yeah.
And I like that. One thing that's very constant in her work, he says, is that inner voice. She's always evaluating experience against some ideal that it never matches. Like, I thought that was a kind of an acute comment as well.
I mean, also she herself, I like her attitude to writing. And when she heard the news on Thursday, she said, I think you have always to be surprised and to be, in a way, a beginner again. Otherwise, she said, I'd bore myself to tears, which is quite good.
Yeah.
Which I think is very good. But if there's one poem of hers that I think gives a real sense of her huge talent and the bravery of her voice, is the poem "The Wild Iris." Do you know that poem, Peter? I particularly like the.
Sure, yeah, that's from the collection of that title, the one that yeah, she won the Pulitzer for that.
Yeah, and I love the opening. She says, "At the end of my suffering, there was a door. Hear me out. That which you call death, I remember. Overheard noises, branches of the pine shifting, then nothing. The weak sun flickered over the dry surface." So it's very clear and commanding and distinctive voice, isn't it? That's what you're hearing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, definitely a week where we had two very different things going on there. But congratulations to Louise Glück. And it's great because it brings us back to her work again. So anyone who has not read her collection, The Wild Iris, I would definitely recommend it. But I know, Peter, you have a poem there of hers that you really want to read as well. Do you want to tell us a bit about it and why you've chosen it?
I mean, it's a well-known poem. It's from that book, The House on Marshland, and I suppose it's just because I came across it a long time ago, and it's stuck in my mind. And I know it's it has become a very well-known poem of hers, and it's kind of typical of the way that she worked as a poet. It's called The Undertaking. The darkness lifts, imagine, in your lifetime. There you are, cased in clean bark. You drift through weaving rushes, fields flooded with cotton. You are free. The river films with lilies. Shrubs appear. Shoots thicken into palm. And now all fear gives way. The light looks after you. You feel the waves' goodwill as arms widen over the water. Love, the key is turned. Extend yourself. It is the Nile. The sun is shining. Everywhere you turn is luck.
So thanks, Peter, for reading that from Louise Glück's collection, The House on Marshland. And I certainly, for one, will be going back to look at her work again. So it's great to have a short chat about her there. So let's move on, Peter, because we actually got out this week and we got to see something very exciting up in Imma. We went to see The Great Hunger, the play, which the Abbey put on in collaboration with Imma. And it was a lashing, rainy, cold evening, but I have to say it was so exciting to go there and to see a live performance. I think it was 1983 when I last saw it, actually, when I was only a young one, and when Tom McIntyre and director Patrick Mason collaborated in an adaptation of The Great Hunger at the Peacock Theatre.
A strange an adaptation that kind of did without his words in that way. There were very few of Kavanagh's words in that, but a lot of I suppose kind of gestures and sort of experimental kind of movement and activity of all kinds. Tom Hickey in the title role, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. I remember there was a kind of a very innovative kind of fusing of word and image and movement. It was quite startling. I remember being really shocked by it. I think I was, I wasn't really that old actually at the time, and it was my first dramatic introduction to Patrick Kavanagh. But this new theatrical version has been directed by Katrina McLaughlin and Conal Morrison. And I think they take ownership of Kavanagh's poem in a really, really exciting way. It was fun being there, even though it was raining, under our umbrellas, and seeing the actors, each of them placed, given their own space, within the courtyard. It was great to see it, wasn't it, Peter? And what a fine cast as
Yeah,
well.
obviously we didn't get the full whack in the sense that the original idea was to, and many people would have experienced that, is to play it in the grounds of Imma. So you're kind of following the actors from site to site within the grounds of the Royal Hospital, Kilmainham, as they performed the poem. But as you say, yeah, the night we went, it was pouring with rain, and we stood in the courtyard under our umbrellas, which could have been a kind of bleak experience, but it wasn't, because as you say, I mean, we moved around the courtyard, and they were there, the actors, kind of in those corridors around. And yeah, it was a great cast. I mean, you had people like Emmett Byrne and Liam Carney was in it, Peter Coonan, Derville Crotty, Andrea Irvine, Elder Methven, Breeding Yachten, many more, and they had musicians as well. So it was a really powerful cast. And I think what was interesting about it is that the words really came through, Kavanagh's words. And you realize, because again, if you haven't read The Great Hunger recently, and I hadn't, and I kind of went back to it actually after the production, and I read it again, and I tend to often avoid it because you think, okay, it's a bleak poem about sexual loneliness and waste and despair in kind of rural Ireland. And at the same time, it's Kavanagh, I suppose, attacking certain kind of stereotypes of the supposedly happy life of the peasant. There's all that kind of stuff happening. But the actual words that he gives to, the narrator who's telling the story of Maguire and his mother, the domineering mother, with a venomous drawl and a wizened face like moth-eaten leatherette. Do you remember like that?
Oh yeah, the mother was brilliant. Yeah, then his mother, tall, hard as a Protestant spire, came down the stairs barefoot at the kettle call and talked to her son sharply. "Did you let the hens out, you?" Yeah, I know. She had a wizened face like moth-eaten leatherette. Two black cats peeped between the banisters and gloated over the bacon fizzling pan. Oh yeah, it was brilliant. The words were amazing. And it opened with Liam Carney. He was the first incarnation of Maguire that we came across, with Lisa O'Neill, the Cavan singer, singing a raucous, guttural song, the rain coming down. And then there was a huge symmetry to the play, because at the end of it, then we finally came back to Mark Lambert, and he was a really strong, feisty Maguire. It was a fantastic ending to the play, wasn't it? And also, you have to say, like, I have such sympathy for actors and theatre people at the moment. With everything being cancelled, it was brilliant to see them, even in the torrential rain, with their old farmer coats on and their wellies. And did you notice as well the way they still had nature throughout it? They had, little bits of grass sticking out of their pockets to give the sense that we were in rural Ireland. It was fantastically produced production, I think. Sarah Keating, when she went to see it and she wrote a review in the Times, said everything about the studied architecture of this ambitious production reveals, as Kavanagh did, that there is beauty even in the dying grasses. So I thought that was very astutely observed. Yeah, I mean, fair play to everybody. And as you said, Peter, it brings us back to the actual words of Kavanagh. He was way ahead of writers at the time, wasn't he? The way he depicted the loneliness.
Just totally sort of brutally honest. But there's just huge power. I mean, just think of lines like Patrick Maguire was still 6 months behind life. His mother 6 months ahead of it. His sister straddle-legged across it, one leg in hell and the other in heaven. And between the purgatory of middle-aged virginity, she prayed for release to heaven or hell. And it's just, so it's full of that. I mean, it is miserable often in its depiction of this kind of this, the bleak wastage of Maguire's life. And, the domineering mother,
The domineering mother, and the sister, of course, as well. And then lines like, "Oh, Christ, I am locked in a stable with pigs and cows forever." Oh, it's so bleak. But we still had a great time, didn't we, Peter?
It was just such a thrill to see live theatre.
To see live theatre, exactly. So here's hoping that we get to see more. But thank you to the Abbey and to Emma for giving us such a great night out. And also to, as we were speaking about Louise Glück there and Derek Mahon, it brings you back to the work. And I think that's really vital. So that's it. I can't think of another ending. Okay, everybody. Thanks for listening.
It will be my best piece. The linen was stretched on a frame now, and it was sized, the glue heated and applied rapidly. It was ready. The water and the pigments were ready also, and set out in their neat little dishes. cinnabar and lead white, azurite, ultramarine, verdigris and smalt, and beautiful, profound malachite. She would prepare the distemper, batch by batch. The colours would blaze if she had anything to do with it, and leap from the cloth and live and breathe. They would never be seen, but this was the very least of her worries. This was the very intention. Later, much later, days later, for the plan to begin and conclude this painting in less than no time, to execute it in a flash with one eye on the sands of her life running rapidly, this plan came to nothing. It had to be done correctly. It had to be done with love and pride, and how foolish she had been even to think of dashing this piece off in a trice. Later she could step back and see this blazing and leaping for herself. The tiny sparks of brilliant white, and the cinnabar and the verdigris, yes, they were intense, they blazed as though alive. The malachite at the centre of all breathed and inhaled and exhaled with life. The distemper, colour by colour, had soaked through the linen as she had intended it should. The fabric now was heavy and sodden, but it would dry, and it would be rolled away, and she would leave her instructions to the letter, and they would be carried out when the time came. When the time came, there was little time left.
Oh, what's going to happen next? That blazing and leaping, what beautiful writing. Well, that was writer.
What's going to happen?
What is going to happen next, exactly. Well, that was Neil Hegarty reading an opening piece from his recent novel, The Jewel, published by Head of Zeus in 2019. Neil Hegarty was born in Derry. He is, as you can hear, a really great writer, prolific and diverse. His novels include The Jewel, which we've just heard from there, and Inch Levels was his debut novel, which was published in 2016 and was shortlisted for the Kerry Group Novel of the Year award. Neil has also written essays and short stories for publications such as the Irish Times, the Daily Telegraph, BBC History Magazine, the Huffington Post, and literary journals such as The Stinging Fly and the Dublin Review. And non-fiction books include Frost, That Was the Life There Was, the authorised biography of Sir David Frost, and The Secret History of Our Streets, which was written for BBC Books in 2012, and is a social history of 20th century London. And there's also The Story of Ireland, again published by BBC Books, written to accompany a new BBC RT television history of Ireland. Neil lives in Dublin with his partner John Lovett, and I have to say, on a personal level, congratulations must go to the both of them, as they've just recently got married. So congratulations, Neil and John. And you're very, very welcome to Books for Breakfast. So
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you, Neil. And I could have just sat there and listened to that novel all day. It was absolutely wonderful to hear it. But to start off with, I just wanted to ask you really about your books about Dublin, because one of my favourite poets, Louis MacNeice, a northerner, just like yourself, he wrote arguably the best poem, I think, about Dublin called Dublin. And you, a Derry man, have also written about the city. 2 books, in fact. You've written Dublin, A View from the Ground, a sweeping history of Dublin right up to the present day, and Waking Up in Dublin, an exploration of Dublin's music culture. So I was just wondering, coming from the north, Neil, what was it about Dublin that so fascinated you about the city that you wanted to write about it? And not only that you wanted to end up living here in glorious Dublin 8, home to Books for Breakfast as well. So,
well, I came here to university and I stayed. And then in the early 2000s, I was asked to write Dublin, A View from the Ground. So it was a commissioned piece, and that was lovely. It's lovely to be approached and to be asked to write a book. But the interesting thing for me in writing that book, I had lived in the city at that point for about 15 years. And I thought, I knew it pretty well. I know its streets, I know its geography, I know its culture and everything else. And the fascinating part of writing Dublin, A View from the Ground in particular was really to see how little I knew about the city that I now call home. Mm-hmm. That there were all sorts of facets and aspects of the city that I really didn't know anything about. So mm-hmm. It was a journey of exploration for me. Mm-hmm. And I decided that I would write it from the point of view of a sort of flaneur, wandering the streets, roaming the highways and the byways, to mm-hmm. keep that sense of movement and freshness and mobility all the way through, and also to glance back over my shoulder at Joyce and at other writers who've done the same thing. So it's
Yeah.
a kind of a homage to Dublin and to my sort of literary ancestors. And it was a way of realizing that you can live in a city forever and ever and ever, and it can always be fresh. It can always be a new place, and there's always something to discover. So that was a
Yeah.
great thing. That was
Yeah.
a great realization that I came to in the course of writing the book.
Well, you spoke about movement and flow there, and it is, as you said, fantastic to discover and rediscover in a city. There's great movement and flow in your wonderful novel, The Jewel, and another great Dublin 8 writer, Henrietta McCurvey. I'm really plugging Dublin 8 today. She said in The Independent that The Jewel she wrote last year is one of the year's gems, which is a really great thing to say about the book, I think. And also The Spectator said it's a work of art in more ways than one. So Neil, you've written a work of art. But at the heart of the book is a painting, which I have to say I really enjoyed reading this book. It's a painting painted in 1839 by Emily Sanborn, isn't it? A Victorian artist she's kind of forgotten about. And there are rumours, I love this mystery, that the painting was buried with her. I hope I'm not giving away too much. But then her family exhume it, and it's this magical thing that hasn't faded at all. So there's kind of a mysterious, imaginative quality. It's a great premise for a novel, and there's a puzzle, a theft, a search. How did the idea originally come to you, Neil? If you're not too exhausted by describing this again, but
not in the least. It's a pleasure. I had always been, for a long time, I've been interested in looking at paintings. I don't have any background in art history at all, but I used to spend quite a lot of time in the National Gallery of Ireland because I live 5 minutes walk from it. So I got into the habit of looking at paintings, the kind of mystique, I think, which comes from art galleries, which I don't agree with. Anybody can look at a painting, anyone can take something from a painting. That sense of mystique left me, and I began to take a lot of pleasure in looking at art. And I was reading a review of the Beyond Caravaggio exhibition, which you might remember, and I was in the National Gallery about 5 years ago.
Yeah, I remember it,
Yeah, it was a big, enormous one. And I was reading a review of it because it had opened at the National Gallery in London. And I thought, what a huge undertaking this must be. And how do people bring all these masterworks from all over the world and bring them together, bring them to London, then bring them to Dublin? The insurance, the security, the awful nightmare of creating an exhibition like this. And then I suddenly thought, well, what would happen if one of these paintings was stolen? Because these things happen, as we know.
Yeah.
And that was the gleam, the first germ of the idea, and it all came from there. I had to do a little bit of initial homework to make sure that it wasn't too far-fetched an idea. And honestly, 5 minutes on Google showed me that there's no such thing as far-fetched when it comes to art theft, when it comes to the stealing of priceless paintings all over the world. It happens all the time in the most improbable ways. So I realized that the initial idea I had was not improbable. In fact, it was highly probable. And the whole novel, the whole story just flowed from there in a really sort of clear way and in a really fast way. I was able to write it in just over a year, which is great.
Oh my gosh, you were kind of gifted it then, that you were hit by the muse, weren't you, Neil? Which is fantastic. But that idea that it flowed smoothly, it does flow very smoothly. And you've got three characters, Roisin and John and Ward, and they're all very damaged in their own distinctive way, I think. That she's the gallery curator, she's got a past trauma. John's the thief, he's disillusioned as an artist. Ward goes off in search of the book. And you skillfully, I think, move between these three characters. Did you enjoy creating those individual lives and moving between them, not just in Dublin, but you moved to London and there's an international element to the novel as well. Was that exciting for you to enter their worlds?
It was very satisfying. I really loved it, even though I was telling three quite difficult stories. It was great to have the opportunity to bring three very different, very individual stories, three very different people to life to fill in their backstory in Ireland, in England, abroad, but also to show the similarities between these three ostensibly very, very different lives. I was very interested in this idea of what happens when something happens in your early life, a trauma, or as I visualize it in my head, a moment of fracture. What happens if that fracture, as a result of a trauma, what if it doesn't heal properly? What if it heals badly?
Yeah.
How do you go on living your life in that way? And is healing eventually possible?
Yeah.
And each of these three characters are, as you say, they're slightly damaged. And I wanted to track them through their lives and to show what happens in order for them to sort of get a sense of the right shape and the right kind of momentum back into their lives. And is that always possible?
Yeah, is it possible? That's true. I mean, they're very profound questions, really, aren't they? But what I loved about the book as well, Neil, was your very distinctive style of writing. I enjoyed Inch Levels as well. I know that Inch Levels was endorsed by John Banville, a writer whomself, it has to be said, thoroughly enjoys the texture of language. I was just wondering, can you talk just a little bit about that? That there is a lyrical kind of beauty to it. It's very close to poetry, I have to say. And I love it. Like, is this hard for you to achieve, or is it something that just comes naturally out of you?
I think that the lyrical impulse is very much part of Irish writing. I think it's something that comes to us naturally. It seems to me that when you're writing prose, I'm conscious I'm speaking to a poet, and you have a whole different set of experiences and kind of muscles to work with in your writing. But with prose, I think it really has to earn its place. It can't just flow on and on and on and on. It has to be used in a, if I can put it this way, in a correct way. So I really enjoyed that lyrical impulse coming through in my description of the painting, for example. So the eponymous jewel, the colors and the textures and the vibrancy of it coming through. But sometimes it isn't appropriate in describing a life and setting out a life. Not all lives are underwritten by a kind of lyricism, so it has to be used in a correct way. I don't know what that says to you, and as a poet.
No, it seems that in the novel, maybe I'm getting this wrong, there is a functionality there. You have to get through the story, so it can't always be. There has to be a balance, I think. But I loved your quote from Tom Gunn as well, the poet, when he said, I see how shadow in the painting brims with a real shadow. So there is that kind of mystery and the shadow of the characters in their lives. But just finally on this part of the chat, Neil, is there a lot of other projects? Are there a lot of other projects going on in your life at the moment? I know you love gardening, but are there any writing projects going on?
I'm coming to the end of a new novel.
Right.
I began that before the pandemic hit, which I'm very grateful about. I had a project underway. I knew the beginning and the middle and the end of it, if I can put it that way.
Well done, yeah.
So I was able to keep a sense of kind of momentum going in these strange times.
Yeah.
So I feel that I'm close to the end of that now.
Okay. And is it a historical novel?
It is a historical novel.
I guessed. I think that would be really interesting to read. I feel that would suit you definitely, Neil.
It's much more of an historical novel actually than the Jewel is.
Oh,
so
right.
It felt like a whole new thing for me, a whole new project.
Oh my God. Well, that's just what you need in lockdown, a whole new project to get you through it.
Yes.
Well, I think, Neil, can I just say thank you so much? It was great to chat to you there. We pass each other on our Dublin 8 streets, but it's great to talk to you really like this about books and writing. So now I think it's time to move on to the Toaster Challenge. And I think Peter is are you getting the toast ready there? Yeah, I think he's getting it ready. So Neil, listen, you've brought in a book that you really, really means something to you. It's touched you in lots of different ways, and I'm excited to hear about it because it's a book that I had actually nearly forgotten about. You've brought it back to the fore. So we're just getting ready. I'm going to count you in, and you're going to talk for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So we've Mr. Sirr keeping an eye on us as well. Okay, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, and off you go, Neil.
Well, My chosen novel is The War Between the Tates by the American writer of fiction and non-fiction, Alison Lurie. And as you say, Lurie is one of my absolute favorite writers. I read her work with, constant pleasure. And The War Between the Tates is one of my very favorite novels, and I've read it lots and lots of times. It was published in 1974, and it's set at the beginning of the 1970s in the small, and I think you could say the highly insular world of Corinth, a college town in upstate New York. It's a stand-in for Ithaca, and Corinth University really is a stand-in for Cornell. The context of the book is all important. The US is convulsed by student unrest, by social and racial tensions, by protest against the war in Vietnam. And it's against this backdrop that we discover Brian and Erica Tate, the perfect couple. Brian Tate is a self-important professor of politics in his 40s at Corinth University. Erica Tate is his self-important wife. And the idealism of their marriage is a source of enduring satisfaction to them both, which makes the very public and sudden disintegration of this marriage, and this is a result of Brian's infidelity with a student, a shock and the most enormous challenge to them both. So how will they hang on to their sense of virtue, of rectitude in the world? How can they deal with this dawning sense that they are actually flawed, just like everybody else? How can they be made to compromise when they've never compromised about anything in their lives? And of course, the title of the novel itself is a riff on the war between the states, the US Civil War. And the title underlines the old adage that the personal really is political. Lurie's take, I think, sometimes she's compassionate, sometimes she's scathing. And in this way, and in lots of other ways, actually, she really reminds me of Jane Austen. And the critical thing is this, and this is why I chose it today. And I used to think of the war between the Tates as in some ways a kind of a period piece. But these days, I read it and I see its tumultuous backdrop being repeated in America today, which makes it seems to me, a very prescient and a very chilling, as well as a very funny read. And I see to my pleasure that the novel has just been reissued, which I'm really, really glad about. So that's my book for the Toaster Challenge, The War Between the Tates by Alison Lurie, and I urge everyone to read it.
Oh, thank you so much, Neil. And it's incredible to think it was published 46 years ago. It's still standing the test of time. As you said, it's still highly relevant.
Highly, highly relevant.
I mean, highly relevant. I suppose young people think they're experiencing things for the first time, but she's explaining something that happened way back in the 70s, loads of different things. And also interesting historically, I think, to go back to that time with the Vietnam War, the start of the feminist movement, the generation gap, sexual liberation, all these things. It brings to mind as well writers like Saul Bellow, doesn't it? And the kind of, who were brilliant as well, writing about the campus novel, or even somebody like, say, Philip Roth as well. All brilliant writers. So you've certainly got me wanting to go back there. I don't know, Peter, if you want to add anything to that.
It's fascinating. I'm very interested in the idea that this is something that you've gone back to and reread, and that it's held up like it's 74. That's a long time ago. And I suppose, like, a lot of people would also know her for the book that she published, I think it was maybe about 10 years after that, the Foreign Affairs. And that's all. And it's not,
that's right.
Again, it's two American professors, and they're very kind of, and she obviously loves that milieu of kind of slightly waspish academic kind of America.
Yeah, I think actually one of her colleagues, the critic Jonathan Culler, he jokingly mentioned once that they were all really petrified in Cornell that she was going to write a sequel to The War Between the Tates. So imagine having her in the department. You'd be thinking, oh my God, I'm going to end up in one of her books. But yeah, I can't say a word. Yeah, fantastic.
I can't say a word. I can't say a word in front of the person. I mean, there is a really chilling aspect to this book. I said that it used to read as a period piece to me, because there are episodes in the book where they go off and try and procure an abortion, which of course in those days is illegal. And they have to go to a backstreet abortionist, and there's talk of a mother and child home. And it's only now, as you see the prospect of Roe versus Wade being pushed back in America, that you realize that this book is prescient in all sorts of ways. And if it ever was a period piece, it doesn't feel like it is so anymore.
Yeah.
So it's another strange aspect to the book, which really makes
Wasn't she
it
very
stand
brave
up,
as
I
well? A
think.
brave writer and an honest writer to be depicting all of that. Well, Neil, I want to go and find that book. I might run up the road and borrow it from you. So definitely I'd recommend, and so would Neil, all listeners, Peter too, to have a look at The War Between the Tates. It's published by Random House in 1974, but as Neil said, it's brilliant that it's being reissued. So thanks, Neil, for coming in to talk about that. And also, it was wonderful to hear that piece and to hear you talking about the writing of The Jewel, your own novel published by Head of Zeus in 2019. And Books for Breakfast will definitely be looking forward to your new novel coming out hopefully very soon, Neil. Hopefully very soon. As usual, I have to say all details about the books we discussed today will be available on booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. So thank you, Neil Hegarty.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
I think we've reached the end of our Books for Breakfast podcast this morning. I'm definitely rushing off to have more coffee. And I'm Enda Wiley, and I have Peter Sirr here with me. And Peter, would you like to tell everyone about the details of the podcast if they'd like to listen again?
Well, you can subscribe at all the usual sources, Google and Apple and so on. And if you want to check out the notes that go along with this podcast, you can go to booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. And so
we'll be back again next Thursday morning. We'll have the toast on, we'll have the kettle boiling, we will have more books to discuss, and we're looking forward to having you here. So goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.